It was the summer of 2012. I remember it vividly, partly because of how uneventful everything seemed at first. I had a late birthday, so while all my friends were already 16 and working their first summer jobs, I was still 15. No matter how many places I applied, no one wanted to hire someone underage. So I turned to Craigslist, hoping to find something off the books. After a bit of scrolling, I came across an ad titled, "Looking for House Cleaning Services, $10 an hour." It stood out. The listing included 2 photos, one showing the exterior of a simple suburban home, and the other an average-looking living room. Nothing about it seemed off. The house was located just a town over, not far. The only contact option was email. I typed a quick message, being honest right away. I was only 15, but I was available and willing to clean for $10 an hour. I hit send, not expecting much. But within 10 minutes, he replied. The man explained his work schedule and when he'd need me to be available. It sounded straightforward. I replied saying I could work with that. Then he asked if I had transportation to get there each day. That's when it hit me. I hadn't even thought about how I'd get there. My mom wouldn't be able to drive me every morning. That's when he offered something unexpected. He said it wouldn't be a problem. He worked nearby and could give me a ride to and from his house every day. Claimed it was on his way, that it was no trouble at all. Without even checking with my mom, I agreed. He asked for my address and I gave it to him. He responded promptly, saying he'd be there at 8:30 a.m. Monday to pick me up. Monday morning came. I was waiting out front when he pulled up, right on time. His car was a black 2005 Nissan Maxima. He looked average, dark beard, Mets cap pulled low over his eyes. But something about the way he was dressed caught my attention. He didn't look ready for work. No uniform, no briefcase, nothing professional. Still, I didn't give it too much thought. He introduced himself as James, friendly enough, I guess. He drove me to the house from the ad, dropped me off, and handed me a single key. "Just straighten things up," he said. "Fold some clothes, do the dishes, vacuum the carpets, basic stuff." Then, without much else, he pulled away, driving off quicker than I expected. It struck me as strange. He didn't know me at all, just a teenager from Craigslist. Yet here he was, leaving me alone in his house, unsupervised, with a key. No security cameras, no warnings, just trust. The house itself wasn't even messy. In fact, it looked like no one had lived in it for a while. I folded some already clean clothes, washed a few spotless dishes, and ran a hand vacuum over the carpets, though they barely had any dust. Still, I kept going. Something about the silence of the house, the stillness, put me a little on edge. But I brushed it off. I figured, hey, maybe I just lucked out. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The only real problem, it was unbearably hot inside the house, even hotter than it was outside, which didn't make any sense. It felt like the walls were trapping the heat, suffocating it into every corner. I quickly noticed that all the windows had been sealed shut, tight. there wasn't so much as a draft. I didn't want to mess with the air conditioning without asking. I mean, it wasn't my house, so I just endured it. 6 long, sticky hours passed before James finally came back. He barely said a word, just handed me $60 in folded bills and then offered me a ride home. He was polite, oddly warm even, and I remember thinking I had really lucked out finding that Craigslist ad. This became a routine for the next 2 weeks, day in, day out. James always paid me on time. He never acted strange, not at first. My mom was even okay with it, especially since I was making money and staying out of trouble. And to be honest, for a while, everything seemed normal. Until that Friday night. I woke up in the middle of the night with a dry throat, desperate for water. As I shuffled toward the kitchen, I happened to glance out my bedroom window and instantly froze. There was someone standing in the yard. They were facing directly toward me, not moving, just staring through the glass into my room. My heart dropped into my stomach. I screamed loud. My parents came rushing in within seconds, but by the time they got there, the figure had vanished into the night, leaving no trace behind. I didn't sleep well after that. The next time I went back to James's house, it was scorching, at least 100 degrees, maybe more. The heat wrapped around you the second you stepped inside, clinging to your skin like a heavy blanket. Sweat already gathering at my temples, I asked James, "Hey, is it okay if I turn on the AC?" He looked at me and casually said, "Oh, it's broken." Then he added with a kind of offhanded smirk, "If you get too hot, you can just take your clothes off." I let out an awkward laugh, hoping he was joking, but he wasn't. His face was dead serious. The air in the room suddenly felt even heavier. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. Nothing had happened exactly, but something shifted in that moment. A line had been crossed, even if it was subtle. I wanted to leave, but instead I said nothing, just nodded and followed him inside. He dropped me off at the house like usual, and I got to work. I kept my distance, tried to stay focused. But it was brutal in there. At least 105 degrees, maybe more. Sweat soaked through my shirt within minutes. The air was stifling, unmoving. It felt like the walls themselves were sweating. Eventually, I gave in and peeled off my shirt, just trying to get through the heat. I kept stepping outside for air, where somehow it was a little more bearable than inside. The whole day dragged on, slow and miserable. But I made it through, just barely. The next day, during the ride to his house, James casually mentioned that he had the day off from work. He smiled as he said it, adding, "I figured I'd just help you out today." My stomach turned. I forced a nod, but inside I was unsettled. I didn't want his help. I didn't want him there at all. I had gotten used to being alone in the house, to doing the cleaning without anyone watching. But now, he was going to be shadowing me. And that's exactly what he did. Everywhere I went, he followed. Not directly behind me, but always close, just a few feet away, hovering like a shadow that wouldn't break. If I moved to the kitchen, he'd drift in. If I vacuumed the living room, he'd stand near the doorway, arms folded, eyes fixed, silent, watching. I tried to act normal, to ignore the crawling sensation under my skin, but it was impossible to shake. Eventually, I said I needed to use the bathroom and quickly slipped upstairs. I moved fast, making sure he wasn't trailing me. I shut the door and locked it behind me, finally feeling a brief moment of relief. But that comfort didn't last. As I looked around the small bathroom, something caught my eye. Something off in the upper corner of the room. I stepped closer. Tucked into the wall, just barely visible through a crack near the molding, was a tiny camera, its lens pointed straight into the room. My heart dropped. I scanned the space frantically, eyes darting to every edge and corner. And there it was, another camera, this one near the bottom of the wall behind the trash can. Almost impossible to see unless you were really looking. A sick feeling grew in my gut. I crouched down, opened the cabinet beneath the sink, and that's when I found something much worse. 2 large stacks of VHS tapes sat inside. Each tape had a sticky note attached, handwritten names scribbled across them, all different. My hands trembled as I reached for the one on top. It had my name on it. My breath hitched, my vision swam. I almost vomited right there on the floor. I had to get out. I had to get out now. Then came a knock on the door. James. "You okay in there?" he asked, his voice muffled but right on the other side. I forced my voice steady. "I'm not feeling well. Could you drive me home?" A pause. Then, "Sure." I stepped out, heart pounding. He was standing there like nothing was wrong. But then he said, "Actually, I've got to use the bathroom real quick." And without waiting for a response, he walked in and shut the door. As we got in the car and started driving, he didn't say a single word. The silence was thick, suffocating. But what made my skin crawl even more was the road he chose. It wasn't familiar. Nothing about the direction looked right. In fact, we were heading in the exact opposite direction of my house. Where are we going?" I asked cautiously, trying to mask the panic in my voice. He turned his head slightly and looked at me. Not angry, not smiling, just cold. "What were you doing in the bathroom?" he asked, flatly. I froze. I didn't answer. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I asked you a question," he said again, this time louder, angrier. We rolled to a stop at a red light, and I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door open, bolted from the car, and ran as fast as I could. I ducked behind a row of parked cars and kept running until I was sure I was out of his sight. Then I called my mom, breathless, shaking, and sobbing into the phone. I begged her to come get me. She didn't ask questions, just said she was on her way. When she picked me up, I told her everything. She went straight to the police. The officers searched the house, and sure enough, they found the tapes right where I said they'd be. Dozens of them. And what they discovered on those tapes. Some showed kids just like me, cleaning the house, unaware they were being watched. But others were much, much worse. Some of the children on the tapes were never identified, and some are still missing to this day. James was arrested shortly after. He was tried on multiple charges: child pornography, kidnapping, and others too dark to even speak out loud. To this day, I don't know where he was taking me when I jumped out of that car, and I don't want to know. This happened about 3 months ago. My roommate and I had finally agreed it was time to get a couch for our place, something second-hand, affordable, but still decent. Naturally, Craigslist seemed like a good place to look for used furniture. I wasn't expecting anything fancy, just something clean and not falling apart. I spent maybe 15-20 minutes scrolling. About 3 pages in, I found it, a sleek, black leather couch. At first glance, it looked almost new. The cushions weren't sagging, the frame looked solid, and the pictures had good lighting. The asking price? Just around $200. Immediately, a voice in the back of my mind whispered, "This is too good to be true." I should have listened to that voice. We exchanged a few emails. I offered the full amount. The seller accepted right away. He gave me an address and told me to meet him at his place to pick it up. Unfortunately, my roommate had to work overtime that evening, so I ended up going alone. The address he sent me was farther out of town than I expected. As I drove, the surroundings got more rural, fewer houses, fewer streetlights, and more dense clusters of trees pressing in on both sides of the narrow road. Eventually, I pulled into a long gravel driveway. The house was tucked away, almost completely hidden by tall trees. You couldn't see it from the road. You had to drive all the way in to even catch a glimpse. I parked and stepped out. Right away, something felt off. The house was small, made of old wood, and had this quiet, weather-worn look to it. The kind of place that didn't just look abandoned, it felt forgotten. Still, I walked up and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Then, on the third knock, I heard it. Creaking floorboards from somewhere inside. They were faint, slow, almost like someone trying not to be heard. But they were definitely footsteps. My pulse quickened. Then a voice, muffled but clear, called from behind the door. "Hey, are you the couch guy?" It sounded rushed, almost panicked. Yeah," I called back, trying to sound casual. "Yes, I am." The voice responded quickly. "Okay, come around back, the couch is there." There was something about the way he said it, hurried, too practiced. My gut twisted, but I tried to shrug it off. Maybe he was just weird. I'd come this far already, and I didn't want to waste the trip. So I started walking around to the back of the house. What I saw there is burned into my memory. There were 4 tall men standing in a semicircle. They were all dressed in long black robes. Their hands were clasped tightly in front of them, heads bowed slightly. In front of them, right in the middle of the backyard, was a pit. A large, open pit with a heavy metal hatch and a thick chain bolted across it. And that's when I heard it again. The same voice from earlier, but this time it didn't come from the door. It came from behind me. Where's your friend? My blood ran cold. I didn't speak. I didn't look back. I just turned and ran. I sprinted back to my car, practically throwing myself into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly, I fumbled with the keys, desperate to get them into the ignition. I finally jammed it in, started the engine, and yanked the gear into first. As I peeled out of the driveway, I caught one last image in my rearview mirror. The front door had flown open. Someone was standing there, watching me flee. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. In all the emails, I never once mentioned I had a roommate. I was about 12 years old at the time. After Christmas, I had a ton of new craft supplies, paints, papers, tools, and nowhere to properly store them. I needed something big. A storage tote, maybe? But when we checked the stores, the prices were ridiculous. Everything decent was way too expensive. So my 27-year-old sister and I started browsing Craigslist. That's when we found it. Someone offering a huge tote for only $10. $10 for something that would normally run around $90. A steal. Almost too good to be true. And yeah, I should have known better. The seller lived relatively close by, which made things even more convenient. We messaged him through Craigslist and gave him our email. Within an hour, he replied. He asked us where we wanted to meet. I suggested the Dollar Tree. It was only a short walk from our apartment. Easy. But then he replied, "How about I just come to your home instead?" That immediately felt off. We lived in an apartment complex, not exactly ideal for visitors. So I replied that we lived farther out than he probably wanted to drive. He pushed back, said it wasn't a problem. He could come anyway. We said no. Eventually, after going back and forth a few more times, we agreed to meet at Dollar Tree. But then he threw in one last detail. I can only meet at 9 p.m. It'd be dark by then, and I hesitated. But I didn't want to lose the deal. That's fine, I said. He replied immediately, "Let's meet tonight." My sister was scheduled to work the night shift, so she couldn't come with me. Still, she thought it seemed harmless enough, just a kid picking up a tote in a public place, so she gave me the okay. "Just bring your wagon," she said, handing me a $10 bill. "That way you won't have to carry it." I left the house at 8:30, wagon rattling behind me. I got there right on time. The parking lot was mostly empty, dimly lit by flickering street lamps. Then I saw it, a beat-up old 2006 Kia pulling in slow, like it didn't want to be noticed. The car looked rough, dented, dirty, and tired. But I figured that had to be him. I called out, "Hey, got the tote?" The driver got out. Older man, unshaven, wearing a faded hoodie. He looked me up and down before speaking. "I left it at home," he said casually. Then he smiled. "You wanna come for a ride? Just a quick trip to my place." Something inside me immediately locked up. A cold, crawling feeling spread across my chest. "I can't," I told him. "My family wouldn't be okay with that." He didn't take the hint. "I'll drive you home after," he offered. "You'll be back in no time." Still, I said no, firmer this time. Then he said, "Come on. If you come with me, I'll give it to you for free." That did it. That uneasy feeling turned to panic. My instincts were screaming. And then he said something that froze me in place. "Your address is 234 Letter Road, right?" My heart dropped. I didn't even remember breathing after that. I turned and ran. Full sprint, not daring to look back. I ran like something was right behind me, like he'd be on my heels if I so much as slowed down. I pulled my wagon behind me, wheels bumping over cracks and curbs, barely hanging on. When I finally reached home, I flew up the stairs, slammed my door shut, and locked every lock we had. Then I went around the apartment, every door, every window, locked, covered. I threw black clothes over the blinds and drapes, blocking out the outside world completely. That night, I curled up in my bed, every muscle tense, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't stop trembling. Even hours later, I was still shaking, like something out there was waiting. And then I heard it. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming up the stairs. They were slow, too slow. Every step creaked with weight, like whoever was climbing was massive. My heart was already thudding, but now it skipped a beat entirely. Nobody on our floor was usually up this late, and besides, no hefty man lived in our building. Then a voice echoed through the hallway, muffled but close. Too close. "Hey, you still want that tote?" the voice said, almost sing-songy. "It's down in my car. Come help me get it." I felt like my insides turned to liquid. I staggered backward from the door, ready to faint or throw up, or both. I slowly crept toward the peephole and peeked through. It was him. His back was facing my door, just standing there, still waiting. Then, without warning, he started turning around. I didn't even think. I grabbed a black shirt from earlier and slammed it over the peephole, smothering any trace of light. Seconds later, the doorknob started to rattle. He was trying to come in. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I slipped beneath the kitchen sink cabinet, curling myself into a ball, hiding like a worm burrowing into the earth. Every second stretched longer than the last. Then the rattling turned to banging, and then kicking. He was trying to kick the door down, over and over. The sound of splintering wood filled the apartment. I was paralyzed. My ears rang. I thought, this is it. I was going to die. I reached out blindly and grabbed the only thing I could find in that tiny space, an old broom. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. Then came the final crash. The door burst open. The apartment filled with his heavy breathing. I could hear him, close, too close. But then, another sound, running footsteps, voices, my neighbors. The door slamming in must have woken them, and they came rushing in. One of them, a guy from 2 doors down, was holding a baseball bat. Without hesitation, he swung. Crack! The bat hit the intruder square in the face, a wet, meaty thud. The man crumpled to the floor. I scrambled out from under the sink, broom still in hand, and gave him a wimpy, instinctive whack across the arm. It barely registered. But then he lurched up, grabbing for me. I didn't think. I leapt down the stairs, skipping entire steps, nearly tumbling head over heels. But I didn't stop. I hit the street barefoot, running full speed under the streetlights, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. I ran like death was chasing me. Because it was. I didn't stop until I reached my sister's workplace, the hospital. I stumbled through the doors, sprinted to the nurse's station, and collapsed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. My entire body was trembling, mouth dry, chest heaving like I'd been drowning. I fell into hysterics, crying, shaking, gagging. I felt like I was going to throw up. The nurses looked at me like I'd just been assaulted, like something unspeakable had happened. One of them wrapped a blanket around me while the others called security. I kept trying to get the words out, voice broken and desperate. "There's a man. He followed me. He tried to. He's going to kill me." My sister came rushing out when she heard. The nurses called the police. It turns out the man wasn't just some creep from Craigslist. He was a serial rapist. They had been looking for him for months. After that night, everything changed. My sister and I moved immediately. Not long after, she went away to college, and I stayed with relatives for a while. But even now, years later, I still can't hear heavy footsteps on a stairwell without freezing in place, because I know what it sounds like when a monster comes looking for you. When you decide to use Craigslist, there's one golden rule: deal local. And if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. I was 20 years old at the time, still driving my grandpa's old Buick, a hand-me-down that wheezed and rattled with every turn. I hated that car. It made me feel like I was stuck in some weird time warp, way older than I was. I wanted something cooler, something me, something that screamed my age. and I had some cash saved up, enough to make a real move. So I started browsing Craigslist. Just casually at first, I wasn't expecting a miracle. But after about a week of searching, I stumbled across something that actually made my jaw drop. A 2013 blue Mustang GT convertible. Manual transmission, no accident history, only 32,000 miles. And the price? $16,000. It didn't make sense. This was a steal, way below market value. My heart started pounding. The ad had just gone up 4 minutes ago. I knew I had to act fast. I dialed the number listed. It went to voicemail. I hung up and called again. This time, on the 4th ring, a man answered. His voice was relaxed, almost cheerful. I told him I was calling about the Mustang. He chuckled and said, "Man, I just posted it like 5 minutes ago. You're quick." He sounded normal, too normal even, friendly, approachable. No red flags in his tone or words. He gave me an address and said I could come check it out that evening. I told him I'd be there by 6 p.m. After hanging up, I sat there buzzing with excitement. This wasn't just a great deal, it was the deal. The kind of find that only comes around once. The guy seemed cool, everything sounded legit. I was practically floating. I punched the address into my GPS. It was a bit of a drive, just over an hour, but I didn't care. I was ready to trade up, and this was it. As I drove, the scenery slowly started to change. The streets I knew, the familiar flow of suburban life faded into the background. Everything became more rural. Sparse homes, fewer gas stations, the kind of place where streetlights are rare and the trees press in from both sides of the road. I kept going. Eventually, my GPS chirped. 2 minutes remaining. But something didn't sit right. The houses were suddenly farther apart. The road was cracked, patched over with uneven gravel. Some of the properties I passed looked abandoned. Rusted-out cars, overgrown weeds. The entire area felt forgotten, like no one really lived here. Or if they did, they didn't want to be found. Still, I kept following the directions. Finally, the GPS announced, "You have arrived." I looked out my window. The house in front of me was small and weather-worn, like it had been beaten down by time and never fixed. The porch sagged slightly. One of the front windows was covered with a sheet instead of a curtain. I double-checked the address. This was the place. But something in my gut tightened. This didn't feel right, not at all. It was a total dump. A run-down, weather-beaten shack that looked like it hadn't seen a paintbrush or a functioning repair crew in decades. The place was crumbling from the outside in. And one thing was immediately obvious. There was no Mustang anywhere in sight. Not in the driveway, not parked on the grass, not even a shadow of a car behind the house. My fingers gripped the steering wheel. I didn't want to get out. I just sat there in the driver's seat, staring at the place for what felt like an eternity, probably a full 5 minutes, debating whether I should even bother walking up to the door. I mean, it had been a long drive. An hour isn't short. But when you show up to a scene that sketchy, you start questioning everything. As I sat there staring, I noticed something move. The blinds in the front window began to twitch, almost like someone was peeking out. A few seconds later, the front door creaked open. A man, probably in his early 50s, stepped outside. He raised a hand and gave me a friendly little wave, then smiled. And strangely, he looked normal, unremarkable, like any guy you'd see waiting in line at the DMV. Against my better judgment, I turned off the ignition and stepped out to greet him. I walked up and asked the obvious question, "So, where's the car?" He smiled again, completely unfazed. "It's in the garage," he said, jerking a thumb behind him. "Come on inside, I'll show you." I hesitated. Why inside? Why not just open the garage door and show me the car? But he was already heading back in, waving for me to follow. And stupidly, I did. As soon as I stepped over the threshold, he closed the front door behind me. Not casually, he made sure it shut all the way. I was immediately hit by a foul stench. The house reeked like rot, mold, stale air that had been trapped for years. And it was barren inside. No couches, no tables, no decor. Bare walls, scuffed floors, just empty. He led me through the living room and down a narrow staircase. The air got colder with each step. At the bottom was a closed door. From behind it, I could hear faint noises, metallic clangs, something being dragged. The man glanced back at me. "That's just my buddy," he said with a chuckle. "He's working on the car." His tone didn't match the mood. Something about it felt rehearsed, unnatural. And then, creaking from upstairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps right above us. I instinctively looked up. So did he. He smiled again, almost nervously this time. "That's my wife." His voice sounded strained, like he needed to explain it, like he was trying too hard to make me believe something I wasn't even questioning. He finally opened the door to the garage, and I got a quick look inside. It was completely empty. No car, no tools, no people, just concrete floors and walls with peeling paint. I turned to face him. He was watching me, eyes narrow, expression unreadable. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't say a word. I spun around and bolted back up the stairs, aiming straight for the front door, only to find someone already standing there, blocking it. My stomach dropped. I tried to play it cool, even though my hands were trembling. I can give you everything in my wallet," I said quickly. "Please, just let me go." No answer. Then the first man stepped into view again, coming up behind me. He was holding something, some kind of sharp metal tool. I don't even know what it was. A scraper? A hook? It didn't matter. It was meant to hurt someone. I took off, bolting in the opposite direction, away from the front door. By sheer luck, I stumbled into a hallway, then spotted a back door at the end of it. I didn't hesitate. I threw it open and burst into the backyard. Without looking back, I circled around the side of the house, jumped into my car, and slammed the door shut. I fumbled with the keys, but got the engine started on the first try. As I pulled out of the driveway, I stole one last glance at the house. The front door had opened again, and the two men were standing behind the storm door, just watching me, not chasing, not yelling, just staring, like they were silently daring me to come back. I gave them the finger and hit the gas. It wasn't until I was halfway down the road that I pulled out my phone and called the cops. My hands were still shaking. I didn't leave the area. I parked nearby and waited until I saw the squad cars pull up. But when the officers entered the house, the men were gone, vanished. And when they searched the place, they made another discovery. Nobody had lived in that house for years. I went home that night feeling a tangled mess of emotions, angry, shaken, but also grateful. Grateful that I escaped, that I was alive. Still, the whole thing clung to me like static. I couldn't stop replaying it. The empty garage, the sharp tool, the silent stairs through the storm door. It didn't feel over. I kept the lights on, double-checked every lock. Then I lay in bed, trying to slow my breathing, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my mind to shut off. It didn't. And just when I started to feel myself slipping into uneasy sleep, my phone rang. 2:04 a.m. The screen said, "Unknown number." My stomach knotted. I didn't answer. Whoever it was didn't leave a voicemail. 10 seconds later, a new notification popped up. Text from unknown number. Look outside your window. My whole body went still. The blinds were drawn. I hadn't even touched them since getting home. But I didn't want to look, not at first. I already knew. I could feel it in my bones. There was someone on the other side of that glass. I didn't hesitate. I called the police again, my voice shaking, trying to keep it steady so they'd take me seriously. And while the line was still active, I yelled loud enough to be heard through the walls. "I'm calling the cops! They'll be here any minute!" I wanted whoever was out there to hear me, to know I wasn't alone, that I was ready. To my shock, the police showed up fast, sirens flashing outside in less than 3 minutes. They moved quickly, quietly, checking the perimeter of the property. Then I heard one of them shout. They found him. The guy was hiding in a bush, pressed up just outside my bedroom window, just watching. He didn't run, didn't resist, just sat there as they pulled him out and cuffed him on the spot. His name was Tony Schelling. It was him, the same man from the house, the same one who smiled, waved, and led me inside. I don't know what his intentions were that night, but I know how close I came to being another headline, another missing person lost to a stranger with a fake ad and a locked door. That night haunts me. The quiet, the voice, the text, and that final moment, knowing he followed me home. If there's one message I can leave you with, it's this. Don't be an idiot when using sites like Craigslist, because not every deal is just a scam. Some of them want you.